Hello and welcome to the Empowered Learning Podcast. This is your host, Andy Bennett. On today's episode, we welcome George Welsh. George is a veteran public educator with over 38 years of experience as a teacher, administrator, and 25 years as a superintendent, winning the prestigious Superintendent of the Year in Colorado. George now serves as a senior partner for the Colorado Education Initiative, a member of the BEST Board, and as a trustee for the Colorado School of Deaf and Blind. Welcome, George.
Hello, George. How are you today?
Doing great, Andy. Nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too. I love the cantina. We were talking right before we hopped on here of just this place in your house. It's bright and colorful, and sounds like you've got a lot of fun things happening in that little area that you're sitting, huh?
The theme is the movie Coco. Right behind me is our ofrenda,
There you
and
go.
the colors might tie together. And my wife Becky and I have a great attraction to Mexico and some of their cultural celebrations.
I love it. I love it. Very cool. Well, I look forward to seeing it in person here in the next couple months with the RSA. But we'll get into that later. Don't want to dive in too quickly here. But so George and I have known each other for years, 20 probably years or so. Not that we've stayed super connected over those times, but he was one of my professors when I was going through my master's program, and always left an indelible place in my heart. And so when we kind of happened upon each other at the CASB, Colorado Association of School Board Members, in December, it was awesome. We got to kind of pick up where we left off and reconnect. So I appreciate him spending a few minutes with us because he's got a lot of projects that we'll dive into it a little bit later. But so thank you, first off, George, for spending some time with us, and appreciate you reconnecting with me.
You know, what's fun, Andy, is I taught for Adams State University for 15 or so years.
Right.
And you can imagine how many students I had over the years in courses like education law and school finance. And I remembered you, trust me, about 90% I have to really think about when I bump into them somewhere and they say, "Hey, you taught my class."
Right. Well, I appreciate that. That means a lot. My brother-in-law, I don't know if he was at the time. I guess he probably was, just newly married brother-in-law Dave Robinson was also going through that program with me. He's an administrator down here in Cortez, so still in the game. But we both
good man, and I remember him well. Also, I think that cohort was pretty memorable for some reason.
Awesome, just awesome people all the way around, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, George, you've lived a wonderful life, a very full life, a very full career in lots of different aspects. So for the people that don't know you as well as I do, give a little bit of a background of, you can start all the way back at childhood if you want to, or just kind of hit the highlights of those and talk to us a little bit about your professional career and kind of where you're at now. And then we'll dive into some fun concepts here.
Sure. And that probably matters a little bit that I actually grew up the formative part of my life in Tucson, Arizona. I lived there from age 8 until, through my teaching career. Attended a Marana High School in Northwest Tucson. And, a lot of things I reflect on about the people I met there have carried forward into my career. I attended the University of Arizona. I can't vouch for it being an excellent college of education. And I actually didn't go in intending to do that, as probably many people in education realize. I thought I wanted to be a journalist, and I didn't even know what that looked like.
Right.
But I landed on my love of history, and I realized in my work life that I love to be the person who would train other people to do the work.
Right.
So it was sort of a lean toward teaching. Was able to teach for 9 years at Tortolita Middle School in the Marana School District in Tucson, Arizona. I was actually the in-school suspension coordinator, and that was back when schools could actually afford a certified teacher for that.
Right.
And then the other 8 years I taught 8th grade social studies, literally the same thing every day for 8 years, 6 times a day in the schedule. But I enjoyed the heck out of that.
Good.
Arizona at the time had a law that said you had to get a master's degree 7 years into your teaching career in order to maintain your certificate. I was gullible enough to think that they would follow through on it. So against my will, I started pursuing a master's. I wanted to get a master's in history, but there was a guy out of a Northern Arizona university who said, you can already teach. Why don't you open some other doors? And he convinced me to go education leadership.
Perfect.
And my story on that front, Andy, is I'm sitting in these education leadership classes against my will with a pretty pissy attitude, and I started to get interested, but I also started to look around the room, and I don't mean this as any disrespect, but I started looking around the room and thinking, I might be working for some of these people someday, and I think maybe I can just do it better.
Right.
And so that kind of set me on the path of thinking I could be a pretty effective administrator. Completed my program, did an internship at Tortolita Middle School, though still while teaching full time and coaching everything just to make ends meet. I was in the spring of 1996. I was ready to seek an administrative position, and I applied everywhere. I interviewed in 5 places, and I did well. I got offered 5 different positions. The one I took was in Center, Colorado, in the San Luis Valley, and the reason I took it is it reminded me of Marana schools when I first started attending in 4th grade. Marana was a small cotton farming community at the time. All the schools were lined up on one campus, and it had a high minority population, a high Hispanic population, Native American population as well. And I didn't look too deeply into Center, but I was attracted to it, so I accepted the position as middle high principal. 1 year into it, the superintendent of schools at the time left to take a position in the Denver metro area as a director, and the board conducted a search, and they hired someone who came in, spent 2 weeks in the position, late summer of 97, and then left. Said, I'm not doing it. And so I literally got a call late at night by our board president saying, would you like to do it? And that's how I became superintendent of schools. And the story I tell is I wasn't qualified, but I was probably the best candidate for Center schools at the time. And I wanted to prove that I was worthy of it.
I love it. Well, and that's honestly, the career-wise, that's kind of where, in addition to the teaching at Adams State, that's where you were teaching, I think, when you were professing for Adams State. Is I knew that you were out at Center, and it's very, for those that don't know, I'm sure that we'll get a lot of Colorado folks from your connections, but for those that are outside of Colorado, Center is in the middle of the San Luis Valley, very, very small, pretty remote, honestly. So I'm thinking from it made me laugh that you said Tucson reminded you of Center. I'm guessing just the layout of the school, because population wise, I don't know what is the population of Center. It's pretty small, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe around 3,000, maybe 2,500 still at this point. High minority population. Right. Most of the time I was there, upper 80 to lower 90% Hispanic population. Farming community, like Marana was for me. Marana did cotton, Center did potatoes mainly, lettuce and some barley and some other things. What was different about Center that I didn't realize I was getting into was the high instance of English language learner population. Right. So if you can put yourself back in 1996, if you're old enough to do it, immigration looked a little different, and undocumented workers were a little bit more common, and so we surely had new arrivals to the United States who had families who lived in the Center area, and very often our task became to communicate with them in their home language and to teach them to transition them to English academically. And so it was a pretty fascinating challenge. My formative years as an education leader took place in Center, and if you don't mind, Andy, some things I would like to share. And in fact, these are stats that I'm proud of to have turned around. When I
Absolutely.
got to center, the graduation rate was 33%.
Wow.
The dropout rate was north of 15%. I think it was 17%. And we can talk for hours about why those two numbers don't jive. Graduation rate means one thing, like in the amount of time did you graduate, and dropout rate is kids disappeared from the system and never re-enrolled elsewhere. It wasn't until 2004 that we had a figure that said 18% of our students after they graduated were continued in some kind of educational endeavor like trade school, community college, or four-year college. So that's pretty low, although it very much matched our community at the time. And then, of course, when accreditation was invented, we'll call it that, what came to being, our elementary school, Haskin Elementary School, after about 10 years effort on my part, maybe more, as a superintendent, earned a bottom 5% performing school in Colorado. So that's probably, I probably earned that while I was teaching you, like I knew what I was talking about. As far as, well, I probably did know what I was talking about with school law and school finance, but I didn't know about instruction at the time. At any rate, so what happens is we go through a turnaround process. In fact, the turnaround dollars came through the Great Recession era, the American Recovery Act, and we had an opportunity to adopt a curriculum aligned to state standards, to support our teachers, to really teach it effectively each day, to develop leaders. I got to work with some of the best education leaders I've ever been in contact with. Kathy Culp was a principal. Sarah, her name is now White, was one of our principals. Kevin Jones, Colorado High School Principal of the Year 2014, he was there. Carrie Zimmerman was our middle school principal. She is now the superintendent of schools in center after someone else replaced me after I left, and then she came on. So we developed some pretty good systemic change. And so what was the result? We always hovered around a 92% graduation rate by the time I left. Dropout rate was 2% or below for at least the last 4 or 5 years. That 18% matriculation rate that I shared with you became an 84% by the time I left. And this is in Center, Colorado, the poorest school district, free and reduced lunch-wise in the state of Colorado. At the time I was there, 84% of our kids were in trade school, community college, or college 2 years after they left. And that was a pretty big accomplishment. Academically, we went from 14% proficiency on average in reading in our elementary school to above the state average for all students in Colorado, not just talking Hispanic, not just talking free or reduced lunch, not just talking English language learners. We were at 76% proficiency in Haskin Elementary School. That, and then being pretty deeply involved legally on the end of advocating for adequate funding in Colorado. Those two things. The Lovato v. Colorado lawsuit was in essence based in Center. The Lovato family is a prestigious family in the Center area, 5th generation farmers who signed on to the lawsuit. I think because of my activity with that and because of the success we had in Center schools, there's a little plaque behind me that says Colorado Superintendent of the Year 2014.
That's amazing. I can't write fast enough. That's phenomenal. Kudos. I would say that is definitely worth sharing there. Congratulations to you. And I know the type of guy that you are, you get to share that. And you and I both know that there was an amazing team of educators and professionals behind you that helped, to make that happen. So, man.
But what I would add to that, Andy, is an amazing school board all through the time I was there. Though that did, and anyone who's been in a position like mine, so 16 plus years into a superintendency in center. We've done all these amazing things, and small town local politics started getting in the way. What happened was there were some members of my staff who had run for and secured seats on the town council, and including I had the mayor of Center on my staff, and there was a portion of the community who had long been in control of the town government who weren't appreciative of the change in political winds, and they tried to go through me to get to them. They wanted me to evaluate my director of technology based on how effective he was as a town board member, or my MTSS coordinator based on how effective she was as a mayor.
Wow.
And I didn't realize what the buzzsaw I was getting into. And what happened is there was an election, a school board election, that brought on two members that their whole task was making my life miserable, and they were very good at it. And so I went through 18 months of feeling like every board meeting was a 3-hour cross-examination. I mean, I was cross-examined by state attorneys in the Lobato v. Colorado lawsuit, and that was easier than attending my board meetings. And then after our ACT scores for the 5th year in a row went up, but in their opinion, not enough, they demanded my resignation.
Wow.
The community, knew what was going on. Wasn't paying attention enough when they elected them, but knew what was going on at this point, and they started a recall election. And so, for 6 months of the last part of the time I was in center, that recall election was going on, and that was a fascinating process to watch. The end result was in March of 2015. Those two members were recalled, and a good strong board filled it up. But what the process of that did for me is it did cause me for Plan Bs to start looking on the other side of the fence. And one place I looked was right where I am right now, is in Canyon City. I had an attraction to the climate, to the river, to the outdoor recreation opportunities. And as we were swinging into the final throes of the recall election, I was selected as a finalist to come and interview. And when I interviewed, I also fell in love with the board that I would get to work with here. And especially after working with the very challenging one for the prior 18 months. And at any rate, when my wife and I drove home from the interview, we talked about what we should do if I'm offered. And we determined that if offered, no matter the outcome of the recall election, we would go ahead and come to Canyon City. And that's what we did. I got offered the position in March of 2015, started on July 1, 2015 as superintendent of schools. Contrasts about a 650 student district and center, mostly Hispanic population, very high free reduced lunch rate. Canyon City, much lower free or reduced lunch rate, but still always hovering above 50%, mainly Anglo population, and about just under 4,000 students when I got here. 8 schools as opposed to the 3 I had in center, actually 4 if you counted our alternative schools. So a very different situation, and a challenge for myself to see, could I replicate some of the successes I feel like we had in center.
Right.
And the short answer is, thanks to significant changes in leadership in the high school, and systematically focusing on good quality first instruction, and then being smart enough to listen to the real intelligent people in this community, especially in my staff, who had a vision for a great school system could be moving forward. Canyon City Schools adopted core beliefs, one of the first school districts in the state to declare a graduate profile. We refined our vision. We got deep into workplace learning. We created an intern and apprentice program for all high school students, meaning every graduating class of around 250, every kid has completed an intern or apprentice experience. We developed a capstone to measure our graduate profile, and the capstone is a graduation requirement. Every kid has to do it, and it's one of the points of pride we have. And all of these innovations that occurred in Canyon City sort of probably got me attention around the state, and the Colorado Education Initiative specifically felt like, oh gosh, George did some pretty good things in the center, and look what he's done in Canyon City, and we want to replicate this throughout the state. And so can we use Canyon City schools as an exemplar as we conduct this homegrown talent initiative process, which was basically made attempting to replicate success in Canyon City and to replicate educational success in St. Vrain. Canyon City was important in the equation because they were doing it in small rural areas, and we were more like the rural schools than St. Vrain is.
Right.
When IBM setting up shop in your district, you have different resources than you have the prisons.
Wow. Yeah, that's fantastic. And I'm not even sure where to dive in there. There's just so much that's really cool that you were able to replicate that and grow on that. And for very good reasons, CDE is like, wow, this is pretty cool. Being from a small part of Colorado, just rural America. I think that was in our reconnection here. That was one of the things that I was just so appreciative of. That there is leaders out there that CDE is listening to that are not based in urban areas. I understand that a vast majority of the student population is in large areas, but Colorado, I think, is unique in the fact that there are so many small districts and small populations right there that what works for one does not necessarily work for the other. So, kudos to them for seeing that, and for you to kind of continue on in that work and, modify best practices to fit for those rural schools, because it is a unique thing for sure.
So, and Andy, you wrote CDE and you've been saying CDE, and I understand the disconnect. The CEI, the Colorado
CEI.
Education Initiative, was the one that sort of keyed into it. Anyway, we serving as a exemplar school for CEI helped me develop a relationship within CEI, and Rebecca Holmes, and I say our because I actually work for the Colorado Education Initiative now. Our leader in CEI, she asked me, I think you kicked this thing off. Wow, yeah, you've lived a long, fruitful life. Emphasis on long, I think. And you can look at me and you can see that. She goes, "Are you thinking about retiring someday? And if so, what does that look like for you?" And I said, "Yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot. And what I'm thinking is, I know I don't want to be a superintendent too much longer because the work pace, the stress, the responsibility is pretty heavy. But I got a concept, and the concept is I knew this guy back in 1997 who had no business being a superintendent of schools in a rural setting, became such, and after about 12 years of taking a bunch of lumps and having a very patient community and board, actually figured it out, I think, and became pretty effective and really contributed to progress in the district he was in, and then did it in another district. And so I have this concept that every rural community in Colorado should have access to a well-prepared, excellent leader of their system. And that's where the idea of the Rural Superintendent Academy came about.
And now, a brief commercial from today's sponsor.
Introducing the new panel from ClearTouch, the 6000 A+. The A+ comes in multiple sizes to fit nearly any room and is the first panel on the market to be EDLA certified. What does that mean? Well, in layman's terms, it means that we can run the entire Google suite. right on the Android side of the panel, and you can manage the panels through Google Admin Console. Some of the features include a 2.2 forward-facing soundbar, multi-screen capability, interactive picture-in-picture, and don't worry, we still offer our integrated PC module like our older models. Keep an eye out for more to come from the A+ series.
For more information, go to intlrn.com/clear-touch.
And now, back to the Empowered Learning Podcast.
Thanks for throwing up our little logo there. I'm very proud of it. And we're in the third cohort of the Rural Superintendent Academy. We were funded by Betcher to get the thing off the ground, the Betcher Academy. And their only ask of us was we would honor a couple of RSA fellows each year with the Seal Chavez Fellowship, Seal longtime superintendent in Colorado, and a member of the Betcher governing board. They wanted to honor her on the way out of her service. Gotcha. And so that Seal Chavez Fellowships on an annual basis pays all expenses for that person in the Rural Superintendent Academy. But what it is we try to find new to superintendency folks who've just been in a few years to the superintendency, people who might be interested in being a superintendent, to apply for the Rural Superintendent Academy. The first year we went small. We only went with 10 fellows. And in the end, we had 8 completers for various reasons. And all 8 of those folks are either superintendents or assistant superintendents or running something equivalent to a rural school system in Colorado. In fact, one of our points of pride is Dr. Brian Hill from Grand Junction, which we can all try to determine how rural Grand Junction is with 20,000 students. He's a completer, and we're proud of the work he does there. And he likes to say, we identify as rural in Grand Junction. We're kind of pretty far removed from Denver.
Sure.
Second year, we had 14 fellows. This year, we have 15. And if you can do the math, we're well up over 30 people who are running Colorado school systems right now. Or are on the track to do so, and we're very proud of that work.
That's amazing.
And by the way, I know you're going to share links. If you want to learn more about it in February, if you're a person who thinks you might want to explore being a rural superintendent, our application process will open up on the CEI website. And you're welcome to share my email address as well if anyone were to see this and say, hey, I want to contact George directly and I want to ask him some questions about what that looks like.
Yeah, I will share both of those in the notes there. And we'll just put your email right there just to make it easy for folks to reach out to you. Fantastic.
Andy, are you comfortable with me just quickly kind of going through what the actual curriculum of RSA is? We have 4 convenings. They one 2-day one, and the rest of them are what I call 24-hour sprints. We meet from noon one day till noon the next day, and it involves social hour and a meal out, and we try to get people to talk, just develop relationships as much as anything. But the concept is this: excellence in governance. The first part of Rural Superintendent Academy is how you develop an outstanding governance team. And that's the work you do as a superintendent, developing relationships and leading your board to excellence. It may not be true, but I don't try to bang my own drum or whatever, but I think I'm the only superintendent in Colorado history who has 2 CASB All-State boards. My board in Center won All-State Board Award, and my board in Canyon City won the All-State Board Award. And I hope that indicates that I have an idea as to how to work well with a governing board. So the second piece is how you radically engage your community is the terminology we use to help set the direction for your district. This is strategic planning. visioning, it's creating a graduate profile, perhaps. Number 3 is how you resource your vision. And so we share with RSA fellows how to just work with your business office and lead that in your system, but also how to secure grants and how to advocate legislatively for the funds you need to do the work you need to do, how to apply or develop relationships with foundations who might support you. Number 4, and I'm going to expand on it just a little bit more, is about transitions. What are you doing in your system to ensure you have the next principal you need when the current excellent principal you have leaves or decides to retire? What are you doing with your board to create a culture and then to create systems within your district to ensure that some pretty high quality people step forward at election time to run for your Board of Education? And then what are you doing as a system leader who maybe has an expiration date to eventually leave your district to make sure that the next leader is in place? And the model I use on that is my relationship with Adam Hartman, who is now the superintendent of schools here in Canyon City. I got to mentor Adam into the position for 2.5 years, and my board even went so far as to hire him as superintendent designee and to work his last year side by side. And to me, it's an exemplar as to how you kind of keep the trajectory positive. I'm so proud of Adam. And Adam was, by the way, the smart guy I listened to help formulate our vision for Canyon City. So he's made me look like a genius. And now he gets to take his vision that he passed on to me forward for, 5, 7, 10 years. So that's pretty exciting.
That's amazing. That's really, really cool. You've mentioned a couple of times just the importance of, board member, finding the right board members, getting those in the right seats, the right people in the right seats. I mean, that's kind of how any, positive organization is going to work. And then the same thing with, superintendents and this idea of a succession plan. What does that look like? And how do you put the right people in the right places? I'm intrigued. How do you do that for school board members? I mean, it just seems like, and again, from coming at it from the angle of being from a small town, it seems like there's minimal people that are going to raise their hand of saying, yes, I'm willing to put up with the politics and be in those school board positions where, a lot of times they run unopposed. So I would love to hear, just for my own benefit, hopefully for others out there, how do you, one, identify, and then two, encourage good people to run for those positions, whether they be board or superintendent or principal? Tell us your secret.
It starts with a board first knowing what it is.
Okay.
And the way I've worked with boards to do that, and tomorrow I'm heading down to Trinidad, Colorado to do some similar work through CEI, helping to support that board develop some governance norms and relationship norms.
Okay.
And so what you do is you work, you create a positive culture in which you communicate effectively with the superintendent, you communicate effectively with each other, you ensure, no matter anyone's political leaning, that nobody's ever left out of the process. The way I address this with boards, I don't care what you want to do. My focus is on getting you guys to agree on how you do it.
Right.
At times you're going to make decisions that are not a unanimous vote. That's okay,
right.
But you got to agree on how you're going to go about that.
Right.
And so once you establish good, effective behavior of a governance team, then you can, set up structures within your system, your district accountability committee, various special committees, where you go out and you engage people in the community to come serve on those committees to learn more about the district. And then they become sort of what I would call your bench strength, that pool of people who might eventually run for the board when election time comes. The last few election cycles, everyone's noticed how some people are trying to take national politics and drive them into school district levels. And the fact of the matter is there's been a strategy out there to make being a board member a little bit challenging because you're gonna, there's people coming and yelling at you about wearing masks, critical race theory,
Sure.
LGBTQ rights, so on and so forth. I don't care about any of that. What I do care about is making sure that whoever's going to run for the board first has the kids in mind, and they're not trying to push a political ideology. And so if the current board can identify some people and get them involved in some of the structures within the district to do that, it's not a far stretch then to encourage a person to run for the board. Too often what happens in rural Colorado is a few people who got an axe to grind are the ones who run for the board. And by the way, that's what happened in Center when I was there.
Yeah.
Folks ran for the board, and people didn't have the radar up as to what their real purpose was. They seemed like normal, rational people. And then when they got on the board, they were doing everything they could to undermine the governance team and the system. I'll say that till the day I die. That happens in other places, and sometimes that means it flips the board to the point of getting rid of the superintendent.
Right.
And maybe there's reason to do that because their view is the superintendent's not effective. But my hope is that, and by the way, what I train boards to do is develop this board culture, and then when the election comes, invite everyone who's running in to learn about the board culture. In Canyon City, they do this thing called the Board Candidate Development Academy. Come in and see what it means to be a board member. It's more than just getting rid of the masks. These are the other things we do, and these are how we got to go about doing them legally. And here's how we've decided to make sure that everyone gets to play a role in that equally. And that has resulted in Canyon City at times I feel like there's a broad spectrum of what's on the Board of Education. And so they have differing opinions about some of those hot button issues today, but they work well together.
Right.
They work well together, and they respect each other, and that's healthy. And that's the kind of thing that'll encourage other people to say, I'm willing to work in that environment.
Right.
I don't want to go into a place where I can't trust the people I'm working with.
Right. Right. And I guess, and again, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. I guess if because this is going to, a lot of people are going to be listening to this and watching this from all walks of life, right? Those that are in positions of leadership, those that are maybe, that have kids in the school district. They're like, hey, I would be willing to do this, but I guess my question is, if it is known or implied or your perspective is that the trust is not there, that it's not a good, positive, trusting relationship to walk into, again, this is more of a personal note than maybe something specific to what you said right there. But I think there are well-meaning people that would like to step up and do more in the school district. But if there is a sense of distrust or power plays, whatever the case is, I think there are many people that stay on the sideline because they don't either think that they're going to make a difference, or that they're just going to get in there and, like you said, get yelled at or get ramrodded, into this one thing or the other. So I guess, any wisdom along those lines, because that's, I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that way.
Yeah, that's probably the $1 million question, right? And my answer to you is I don't know any other way to deal with it than to create a good, stable and positive board culture where when people look at that board and say, hey, they function well. Right. I know that person does not agree with that person ideologically. Right. But when I watch them in the meetings, each listens to each other's opinion, acknowledges their differences, votes their conscience, and then they move ahead for the benefit of the district. And I could be part of that because I may not agree with the whole board, with majority of the board. If on the other hand you see nastiness between them, there's rumors going out in the community about how one lies about the other. But real big is speaking for other board members. A board member should never speak for another board member. If you want to know what that other board member thinks, go ask that other board member, is my answer. And when you set up these norms where I'm not going to speak for Joe,
Right.
you can watch him in the meeting and he'll say what he thinks, and why he thinks it. Or if you got questions, go to Joe.
Right.
You know, and that creates an environment in which you can disagree respectfully,
Right.
and do your best in the diverse manner of your makeup to make the best decisions for the kids in your community.
Right. Yeah, just fostering that environment of regardless of your political leaning or your personal agenda, and you hate to say it that way, but that I don't know if there's very many people that come in that are completely devoid of an agenda, right? You're going to have one, but can you put it aside for the betterment of the whole? And I know that there's people out there, but unfortunately, sometimes the squeaky wheel or the noisy ones get all the attention, right?
Unfortunately, that happens sometimes. Yeah.
Right. I love it. So George, you, in addition to the Rural Superintendent's Academy, working with CEI, you've got a couple other organizations that you are still instrumental in working with. Tell us a little bit about those and what they do.
Yeah. There's a lot more to what I do and how much I've failed at retirement, but probably the things that I'm most focused on outside of that CEI role include I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of the Colorado School for Deaf and Blind. And in fact, we've been going through a superintendent search. And in fact, last night we had a 4-hour meeting after interviews in which we solicited public comment. We read public comment. We discussed the candidates who interviewed, and we came to a 5-2 vote to hire our superintendent. And that may sound like a failure or something like that. And my opinion is it's success. We have such a trusting relationship on the Board of Trustees that everyone felt very comfortable in front of 200 people discussing what we thought about the candidates and explaining why we thought one would be stronger than the other. And then a motion was made and a vote was cast, and we made the hire. And we have 2 people on our board who voted no because they thought another candidate would have been the most effective hire. However, they respect the process. They know that the candidate that was hired is effective and has a great chance of success as well. And we're all going to be in it together and work to ensure that the community has been heard, the school is unified, and that we're going to move forward and do some great things on behalf of the children who get services from the Colorado School for Deaf and Blind. Something I just got to add on this, Andy, is I thought I learned a lot in my 25 years as a superintendent of schools. I think the last 6 months since I've been on the Colorado School for Deaf and Blind board, I've grown more as a human being and understanding accessibility needs and what a blind person needs when you're discussing a pie chart at a meeting. Can you imagine that? Right.
And what about it?
The patience you have to have a board chair who's amazing, but who communicates all through sign. And so you have to have the interpreter piece of that. And then to try to bring populations that are deaf, that are blind, and that are deaf and blind together into one school community, and to push out services all around the state. I was appointed to the board by Governor Jared Polis, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that I was appointed because I'm a registered Republican and he needed a Republican on the board. So that maybe made, I don't know, maybe I was a palatable Republican to him. I don't know, but I take the charge seriously. Sure. And my core beliefs center around you should always make your decisions regarding what's in the best interest of kids. And so that's what I do there. A second fun thing I get to do is I'm on the Building Excellent Schools Today board, the state facilities department board. I've only been on that board since about September in terms of attending my first meeting. This was an appointment by the Colorado State Board of Education, and I'm a representative of rural and system leader interests because of my various roles. And in Center, Colorado, I got to build a brand new K-12 school for my system. And in Canyon City, I got to build a new elementary school, and we got to restore a beautiful historic building, Canyon City Middle School, and add some great space to it. In my role in Colorado School for Deaf and Blind, there's an award-winning facility in which it took more than 100-year-old facility and added to it and updated it through the Building Excellent Schools Today program. Awesome. My role there is to help develop the policies by which the board will solicit applications to advocate for more funding for BEST, because I think it's been a game changer for so many rural communities in Colorado. And then I'll be part of the decision-making process this coming April or May when applications are submitted, and we have to take what scarce resources we have and dole them out around the state to make sure that they're good projects. So.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, and you probably know, the new high school in Cortez was a BEST grant school as well. So I cannot understate the impact that it has on a community when you get a new school that you know that the community will rally behind and spend all of their Friday nights and Saturday afternoons in for 40, 50 years. It makes a huge difference in a community. So that's phenomenal that you get to be a part of that.
Andy, prior to the BEST program, it would have been illegal for you guys to have that building project in Cortez, and that really sounds a little bit weird. And the reason why is you wouldn't have been able to raise your mills enough if your voters were crazy enough to vote for it,
right?
To raise the money to do that project. In Center, we could only produce 15% of the cost of a new building. If we had to produce 100% of the cost of a new building, we would have never passed that locally. And in fact, it would have been illegal because you can only go up to 20% of your property capacity on a bond. So we maxed our bond capacity in Center to get that new building. You guys probably maxed your bonding capacity in Cortez to get your new building. In Canyon City, didn't have to max because we were able to make the match that we were required by the state. But without that selling point where for 33 cents on the dollar, we're going to get you a new building, it's hard to pass that measure in a community like Canyon City.
Right. And again, just from personal experience, I think that had been up for up on bond and for a mill levy increase 3 or 4 times, maybe even more than that before it finally passed. So you are correct. There's not enough money there just in the local fund. So this helps to partner with those and to get them over the hump to get those new schools. So that's phenomenal.
It's a great program, and right now it might be harder to find a district in Colorado that hasn't been a benefit of the program
Probably
than
so.
to find one that has, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, George, time flies when you're having fun. This has been absolutely just intriguing. I'm going to re-listen to this a few times just to catch all of the fun little things that maybe I missed the first time here. So thank you so much for this. I do have a grab bag question before we jump into the 3 key questions. Rather than randomizing it, I want to grab one that I think suits the conversation here. So you've been in education a long time and from varying roles, right? Teacher, principal, superintendent, now working at a state level. For those that maybe are either on a similar path or maybe have some misconceptions, what are some misconceptions that you'd like to clear up? I would say superintendents. I think superintendents get a really, really bad rap. I think people don't understand all of the hoops that they have to jump through and all of the other things that they have to weigh in when they're making decisions. So at whatever level you think there's the most misconceptions, what are some misconceptions that you'd like to clear up for people in education leadership?
Yeah, at the superintendent level, if you're an effective superintendent, you realize that you don't get to make unilateral decisions. Every decision you make, you have to build consensus for.
Right.
The ones who the superintendents who tend to struggle being successful in the districts they're in either don't follow through on promises, or they move faster than their system's ready to move. They don't educate the system and convince the system and listen to the system as to what it's capable and willing to do. So that for sure would be a big part of it. You don't get to. I think there's people out in public who think the superintendent gets to do whatever they want, and maybe some of them even act that way a little bit. But the successful ones know they go nowhere without everyone else.
Right. Yep, that idea of it is a team approach. They may be the head of that team and the public view of that, but it is a team approach. So very, very good. Appreciate that. All right, so we ask all of our guests 3 key questions, and we're going to start off with key question number 1. George, who is the leader that you most admire and try to emulate?
If nobody watches this podcast, Andy, except for a guy by the name of Dave Santamaria, I hope it's at least him. I'll feel like it's been a victory, because Dave Santamaria was my 7th and 8th grade baseball coach. He was my 7th grade basketball coach, and he was a counselor at Marana Junior High when I went there, though I didn't access him much that way. And when I didn't know what the heck I was doing and was looking for a job, when I finally earned a teaching certificate, Dave was the one who hired me as the in-school suspension coordinator at Tortolita Middle School. And then I think in strategic fashion was able to get me to actually teach my passion area, and that was social studies. There isn't a thing I do on a daily basis where I don't think about how Dave would have handled it. And the way he handled it was with compassion, patience, unconditional love is the way I would say it, but always willing to make the decision that was in the best interest of kids. And I try to emulate that in everything I do.
I love it. What would Dave do, right? Instead of what would Jesus do?
That's it. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. I'm very interested to hear your answer to this next one, because we were talking right before we hopped on. And actually, you just mentioned it a little bit in the thing when you were talking about your role with the deaf and blind school. You've obviously learned a lot throughout the years. What learning has most impacted you in the last year?
Yeah, I have to reshare that as so. For example, I think there's a piece of legislation being considered that is really focused on for governing boards, for school governing boards, to increase accessibility to the community. And some of that is simple. It's like, do you get the agenda? Do you get the information that the board considers as they make decision? Do you, have access to participating in the meeting digitally, remotely, as so many of us are doing nowadays? Those are simple things, but accessibility also means to me, is there a deaf person in your community who would like to attend a board meeting, follow along, know what's going on in their community? And are you doing anything to make sure that they have access to it? And are you doing the same to for a blind person? And it doesn't mean that you have to get interpreters or visual describers for everyone who needs one, but it means that you can maybe take advantage of some technology right now that's available to ensure a meeting's closed captioned at a fairly effective level. And that software is out there, and that the people who are doing the business of the board are taking into account that some people may not be able to see that chart you're talking about. So you might offer a good visual description of it as you discuss it. So those are some things.
I love it. Love it. Very good. All right. Last one. George, what would you do, or how would you rather empower learning for future generations? What would that look like for you? Sorry, I got to get this out of the way here. All right. How would you empower learning for future generations?
Answer is relevancy.
Okay.
I think a great amount of the history of education in the United States, and it has to, rest on reading and writing and computing. You got to be able to do all that stuff,
Sure.
right? But once you get to the mastery of that to some level, you've got to connect what you're teaching to kids with how they might deal with it in the real world.
Right.
And I see the most effective school systems keeping in mind, that their kids are going to be out in the real world, and this algebra lesson, this expressive writing lesson, how you might apply it to their workplace or their career at a later point in life. To me, that drives interest in students, and it's my belief that that is exactly what students want. There was a kid who once said, I just need the logistics for life, man. Let me know what I'm going to need to be successful, to hold a job, to get my education, and I feel like too much of what I do in school is completely disconnected from that.
I
draw the
completely agree.
connections.
Do you think that this recent movement of CTE, do you think that's a step in the right direction for that?
Absolutely. And if you look at what's happened in Canyon City, it's great CTE programs, it's industry certifications the kids are earning, and then coupling that with an actual internship in that career they may be interested in, and then a capstone project that ties to that potential future career path. What you're doing is you're hooking the kids on something they're interested in that's relevant to them, and they're doing some incredible stuff.
I love it. Well, George, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This is time, like literally, we could probably spend another hour or so talking about this. So we might have to just make this a regular thing, or bring you back for another one, just because I'm sure you've got a lot more that you could share.
Well, Andy, it's been great reconnecting with you, and I look forward to seeing you around. Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much again. Have a good day.